The snow had started falling at exactly 6:47 p.m., each flake catching the amber glow of the streetlights on Fifth Avenue like tiny suspended promises. Emma Chen stood outside the restaurant in her paint-stained overalls and her grandmother's oversized wool cardigan, her hair escaping its messy bun in every direction, and she could feel her carefully constructed excuse already dissolving on her tongue. But before we step deeper into this memory, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe to follow the next journeys. She hadn't meant to show up like this. Disheveled, distracted, smelling faintly of turpentine and December cold. The blind date had been Katie's idea, her best friend's relentless campaign to get Emma back into the world, after 2 years of hiding inside her art studio in Brooklyn. Emma had agreed only to make Katie stop worrying, had fully intended to cancel with some vague excuse about a gallery emergency. But then, the afternoon had gotten away from her, the way it always did when she was deep in a painting. And suddenly it was 6:30 and Katie was texting threats about showing up at her studio if Emma didn't go. So here she was, catastrophically underdressed outside Lumiere, one of Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurants, watching well-groomed couples glide through the gold-framed entrance while she debated the social acceptability of just walking away. Her phone buzzed. Katie again. "He's a nice guy, Em. CEO of something tech-related. Just give him an hour. What's the worst that could happen?" Emma had learned the hard way that the worst could happen quite easily. It had happened 3 years ago when her ex-fiancé had chosen his family's expectations over their shared dreams. It had happened when her father's gallery had gone under, taking her inheritance and her naive belief that love and art could somehow be enough. She'd rebuilt herself since then, slowly, quietly, one brushstroke at a time. She didn't need romance. She needed safety. But Katie had used the word that always worked. Please. The restaurant's warmth hit her like a wave when she finally stepped inside. The maitre d' took one look at her paint-stained appearance, and his expression shifted through several stages of professional distress before settling on polite skepticism. "Reservation name?" "Chen. I'm meeting someone. Alexander." She realized she didn't know his last name. Alexander something. Tall, apparently. "Mr. Harding, of course." The maitre d's demeanor shifted instantly, his skepticism transforming into something more careful. "This way, please." She followed him through the dining room, acutely aware of the turning heads, the whispered observations, the way her worn Converse squeaked slightly against the polished floor. And then she saw him. Alexander Harding sat at a corner table, backlit by the Manhattan skyline, and Emma's first thought was that Katie had significantly undersold the situation. He wasn't just a CEO of something tech-related. The man looked like he'd been designed by someone who took the concept of masculine elegance as a personal challenge. Dark hair with just enough silver at the temples to suggest wisdom rather than age, a jawline that belonged in Renaissance paintings, and a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He stood as she approached, and for a moment, just a fraction of a second, something unguarded crossed his face. Not disappointment at her appearance, which she'd braced for. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, though they'd never met. "Emma." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, with a slight rasp that suggested either too many late nights or too much careful control. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, gesturing at herself. "I was painting and I lost track of time, and I should have canceled. Honestly, you don't deserve to sit through dinner with someone who looks like they just emerged from a creative disaster, so if you want to just, please sit down." He was smiling now, and it changed his entire face, softened all those sharp, successful edges into something unexpectedly warm. "I was starting to worry you'd figured out I was boring and decided not to show up at all." Emma sat, primarily because her legs had stopped reliably supporting her weight. Up close, She could see the small details Katie's description had missed. The faint scar above his left eyebrow. The calluses on his hands that suggested he did more than sign papers. The way his perfectly knotted tie sat just slightly askew, as if he'd been tugging at it. "What were you painting?" he asked. And the question was so genuinely curious, so absent of the polite disinterest she'd expected, that Emma found herself answering honestly. "A memory," she said, "of my grandmother's apartment in Chinatown during Christmas. The way the lights from the street would come through her window and make patterns on the wall." She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry, that probably sounds like something I'd like to see," Alexander finished quietly. He was looking at her the way people looked at art in galleries, with full attention, as if she might reveal something important if he just watched carefully enough. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the careful walls she'd built. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Manhattan in a blanket of temporary grace. And she realized with a startling clarity that Katie had been catastrophically right about one thing. The worst thing that could happen wasn't showing up disheveled to a blind date. The worst thing that could happen was showing up exactly as she was, and having him see her anyway. The waiter appeared with menus bound in leather that whispered wealth with every touch, and Emma watched Alexander order wine with the kind of easy confidence that came from a lifetime of belonging in spaces like this. She should have felt out of place. She was out of place, objectively speaking. But something about the way he kept glancing at her, as if checking to make sure she was still real, made the expensive surroundings fade into irrelevance. "So," she said, once the waiter had retreated with their orders, "Katie told me you're a CEO of something tech-related." That was literally the extent of her briefing. Alexander laughed, and the sound was surprisingly unguarded. "That's fair. I told my assistant the same thing about you. Artist, lives in Brooklyn. Probably too interesting for me." "Your assistant set this up?" "Katie is relentless. She wore down my assistant who wore me down. Apparently I've been impossible since Thanksgiving." He said the last word with the particular weariness of someone who'd heard it frequently. "I run a software company. We develop AI systems for healthcare applications. He paused, and something complicated crossed his face. "It's important work. It's also consuming." Emma recognized that pause, the weight of things left unsaid. But nothing. That's the problem. He leaned back slightly, and the movement made the city lights behind him scatter across his features. "I'm very good at building things. Systems, companies, solutions. I'm less good at..." He gestured vaguely between them. "This. People tell me I should want more than conference calls and product launches, but wanting something and knowing how to reach for it are different skills." The honesty surprised her. In her experience, successful men didn't admit to uncertainty, especially not on first dates. "What made you say yes to tonight?" "Katie sent my assistant a photo of one of your paintings, the one with the red door and the grandmother's hands. My assistant showed it to me during a board meeting." He smiled at the memory. "I stared at it for so long that everyone thought I was having some kind of breakdown. But I couldn't stop looking at how you'd painted the light. Like it was something alive. Something that mattered." Emma felt her breath catch. That painting had taken her 3 months to finish. 3 months of trying to capture the exact quality of afternoon sun filtering through rice paper, the way her grandmother's hands had looked when she'd made dumplings, the particular tenderness of being 7 years old and safe. She'd never sold it. Couldn't. "It's not for sale," she said quietly. "I know. Katie told me. I said yes to tonight anyway." The wine arrived, rich and red, and probably older than Emma's entire art career. Alexander poured with careful attention, and she noticed again those calluses on his hands, the slight roughness that didn't match his polished exterior. "What do you do with your hands?" The question came out before she could stop it. "I mean, you have calluses. They're not typical CEO hands. He looked down at his palms as if seeing them for the first time. I build things, actually build them physically. In my workshop at home. Furniture, mostly. Tables, chairs, bookshelves, He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his face. It's the only time I feel like I'm making something real. Everything else is just code and capital and promises about the future. Emma understood that feeling. The hunger for something tangible, something that would still exist when you were gone. What's the last thing you built? A rocking chair. For my sister's baby. His voice softened. She's having a girl. Due in February. I spent 6 weeks getting the curve of the rockers exactly right because I kept thinking about how my mother used to rock us when we were small. How that motion was the only thing that made the world feel safe. There it was again. That crack in the polished surface. The human underneath the suit. Emma found herself leaning forward, her untouched wine forgotten. Does your sister know about the chair? Not yet. I'm terrible at giving gifts. I always worry they're not... He paused, searching for the word. Enough. That I'm not enough, underneath all the success and the money and the things people expect me to be. The words hung between them like a confession, and Emma realized she was holding her breath. Outside, the snow had intensified, turning Fifth Avenue into something from a snow globe. The kind of scene that only existed in Christmas movies and expensive restaurants, and moments that felt too fragile to be real. I think, she said carefully, that the rocking chair is exactly enough. Alexander looked at her then, really looked at her, and Emma felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. His eyes were gray, she noticed, the kind of gray that changed depending on the light. And right now they were the color of winter mornings and unspoken questions. Tell me about the painting, he said. The one you were working on today. The memory of your grandmother's apartment. So she told him. About how her grandmother had emigrated from Shanghai with nothing but a suitcase and a photograph of Emma's grandfather, who died before Emma was born. About the tiny apartment in Chinatown that had smelled like star anise and mothballs and safety. About how every Christmas, her grandmother would string lights around the window, not for religious reasons, but because she loved the way they made the darkness beautiful. She died when I was 15, Emma said, and I've been trying to paint that apartment ever since. The exact quality of light, the specific feeling of belonging. I've done maybe 30 versions over the years, and none of them are quite right. What are you looking for? The moment right before loss, when you don't know yet that everything is temporary. She realized her voice had dropped to almost a whisper. When you still believe that the people you love will always be there. Alexander's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. Not quite contact, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin, the careful restraint in the gesture. I think, he said quietly, that might be what everyone is looking for, in paintings, in furniture, in whatever we build hoping it will last. Emma looked down at their almost touching hands, at the space between them that felt charged with possibility and danger, and something she couldn't quite name. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably Katie demanding updates, but she ignored it. The waiter arrived with their food, and the spell broke slightly, enough for Emma to realize that she'd been leaning forward, that her heart was beating faster than the moment required, that something was happening that she hadn't planned for and didn't know how to stop. Alexander smiled at her across the table, and there was something in that smile, something tentative and hopeful and quietly terrified, that made Emma think that maybe, possibly, catastrophically, Katie had been right about more than just showing up. Maybe the worst thing that could happen was already happening. Maybe she was already falling. They stayed at Lumiere until the staff began giving them pointed looks, the kind of subtle professional pressure that suggested the table was needed for the next seating. Emma had lost track of time entirely. Something that only happened when she was painting, or apparently, when she was talking to Alexander Harding about everything and nothing. Childhood fears, favorite books, the specific loneliness of being good at things that didn't make you happy. Outside, the snow had transformed Manhattan into something softer, quieter. Fifth Avenue stretched before them like a promise, the holiday lights reflecting off the fresh powder in a way that made Emma's fingers itch for her brushes. "Can I walk you somewhere?" Alexander asked, and there was something careful in the question, as if he was trying very hard not to assume anything. "Brooklyn," Emma said, "but that's a long walk." "I have time." He said it simply, as if clearing his evening for a 2-hour walk through a snowstorm with a woman he'd just met was the most natural thing in the world. They walked south, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air, and Emma found herself telling him things she hadn't planned to share. About her father's gallery, how it had been her entire childhood, the smell of oil paint and pretension, the artists who'd treated her like a small adult, teaching her to see light and shadow and the space between what was painted and what was felt. "He lost everything in 2019, she said, watching her Converse leave prints in the fresh snow. Bad investments, worse timing, and a lot of trusting the wrong people. He died 6 months later. Heart attack, officially. But I think it was really just..." She paused, searching for the right words. Disappointment. In himself. In how the story ended. Alexander was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried its own weight of understanding. "My father built his company from nothing. Immigrant story, American dream, all of it. He died the same year as yours, 2019. He was at his desk, working on a deal at 11 p.m., and his heart just stopped." He looked up at the falling snow. "Everyone said he died doing what he loved, but I kept thinking, what if what he loved was actually killing him? What if success was just another word for sacrifice?" Emma felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that went deeper than shared loss. "Is that why you build furniture? To make something that isn't about sacrifice?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to prove I can make something with my hands that doesn't require destroying myself in the process." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My ex-fiancée used to say I was addicted to work, that I didn't know how to be present. She left 2 years ago, and the worst part was knowing she was right." There it was, the wound that matched her own, the particular scar tissue that came from being chosen against. Emma stopped walking, and Alexander stopped with her, snow catching in his dark hair like small stars. "Mine left, too," she said. 3 years ago. He said he loved me, but he loved his family's approval more. They didn't think an artist was a suitable match for their son, the lawyer. He chose them." She wrapped her grandmother's cardigan tighter around herself. "I spent a year thinking I wasn't enough. That if I'd been more successful, more polished, more suitable, he would have stayed. Emma. But then I realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't enough. The problem was that he was looking for someone who could fit into a life that was already built. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a piece of furniture that matched the aesthetic." She looked up at Alexander, at the snow gathering on his expensive coat, at the way he was watching her like she was saying something that mattered. "I swore after that I'd never make myself smaller for someone else's comfort." Alexander's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "And here you are, on a blind date with a CEO who probably looks exactly like the kind of man who'd want you to fit into his pre-built life. Are you?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Is that what you're looking for?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the snow melting on his shoulders, could smell cedar and something expensive and underneath it all. Something like sawdust and honesty. I don't know what I'm looking for, he said quietly. I thought I did. I thought I wanted someone who understood my world, who could navigate board dinners and charity galas and all the performance that comes with being successful. But then Katie showed me your painting, and I couldn't stop thinking about how you'd captured something I'd spent my whole life trying to find. Not success, not achievement, just... He paused, and his voice dropped even lower. Truth. Something real. Emma felt her breath catch. They were standing too close now, close enough that anyone walking past would assume they were lovers having an intimate conversation, not strangers navigating the dangerous territory between possibility and self-protection. I'm terrible at this, she said, at letting people in, at trusting that they won't. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Leave? Alexander finished quietly. Yeah, me too. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw. A taxi passed, its headlights cutting through the snow, and for a moment they were illuminated. Two people trying very hard to be brave enough for whatever was happening. I should tell you something, Alexander said, and there was a new tension in his voice, something that made Emma's stomach tighten with preemptive disappointment. This week is complicated. It's the week before Christmas, and I'm in the middle of closing the biggest deal of my career. It's going to require everything I have. Late nights, impossible decisions, the kind of consuming pressure that makes me exactly the kind of person my ex was right to leave. Emma felt the familiar weight of inevitability settling over her shoulders. Of course there was a complication, a reason this couldn't work, a built-in excuse for why connection wasn't possible. So this was... what? A nice evening before you disappear into your real life? She hated how small her voice sounded. No, he said it firmly, his hand reaching out to catch hers before she could step away. His fingers were warm despite the cold, and his grip was gentle but certain. This was me being terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to choose work over you the way I've chosen work over everything else that mattered, and you're going to realize that your ex and my ex were right about people like us, that we're too damaged, too devoted to our own protection, to actually let anyone matter. Emma looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his expensive watch and her paint-stained fingers, and felt something crack open in her chest. That careful wall she'd built, the one that had kept her safe and small and alone. I don't want to be someone's maybe, she said. I don't want to be the thing you fit in between meetings and obligations. I've already been that. I've already been the person someone chose when it was convenient. Then don't be. Alexander's voice was rough now, urgent. Be the thing I'm terrified of messing up. Be the reason I want to figure out how to be present. Be... He stopped, and when he continued, his voice was barely above a whisper. Be worth changing for. The words hit Emma like a physical thing, and she realized her eyes were burning with tears. She refused to let fall. That's not fair, she said. You can't say things like that when you've known me for 3 hours. I know. His thumb moved across her knuckles, a small gesture that felt enormous. But I'm saying them anyway, because I think if I don't, if I let you walk away thinking this was just a nice evening with no future, I'm going to spend the rest of my life building furniture and wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to be honest. Emma looked up at him then, at this man who was supposed to be just another blind date, another evening to survive before returning to her safe, small life. Snow continued to fall around them, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear Christmas music drifting from a shop, something about silent nights and holy nights and peace that felt impossibly far away from this moment of terrifying clarity. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Alexander said, and he smiled. That real smile that transformed his entire face. That means it matters. He was right. and Emma hated him a little for it. She pulled her hand from his, not in rejection, but in self-preservation, needing the space to think clearly. "Walk me to the subway," she said finally, "and we'll figure out what comes next." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even really hope, but it was something. And as they started walking again through the snow-covered streets, Emma realized that something was more than she'd had in 3 years. Maybe, possibly catastrophically, it was enough. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning, 3 days after the snow-covered walk that had ended with Alexander kissing her forehead at the subway entrance. A gesture so tender and restrained that Emma had thought about it for 48 hours straight. She fumbled for her phone in the darkness of her studio apartment, her heart already racing with the particular panic that came with middle-of-the-night calls. "Hello? Emma? God, I'm sorry. I know it's late." Alexander's voice was rough, exhausted. I needed to hear your voice." She sat up, pulling her grandmother's quilt around her shoulders. "What's wrong?" "Everything. Nothing. The deal is falling apart." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We've been in negotiations for 6 months. This merger would give us the capital to expand our healthcare AI into rural hospitals, places that desperately need it. But the other company's board just discovered some clause in our contract that they're using as leverage to renegotiate everything. My team has been in conference rooms for 16 hours straight." Emma could hear the exhaustion bleeding through his words, could picture him in some glass office overlooking Manhattan, still wearing yesterday's suit. "Why are you calling me?" "Because I promised myself I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't disappear into work and let something that matters slip away while I'm busy being successful." His voice cracked slightly. "But I don't know how to be both people. The CEO who saves the deal, and the man who shows up for you." The honesty of it pierced through Emma's drowsiness. She thought about her own struggles, the paintings she'd abandoned mid-brushstroke because grief or fear had convinced her they weren't worth finishing. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. That you'll wait? That you understand? That I'm not exactly like your ex, even though I'm doing exactly what he did, choosing my career over—" He stopped abruptly. "Over what, Alexander?" The silence stretched between them, filled with everything he wasn't saying. Finally, "Over us. Over whatever this could be." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settling over her. She'd known this was coming, hadn't she? Known that the snow globe evening was just that, a moment of temporary magic before reality reasserted itself. "You should go," she said quietly. "Back to your meeting. Save your deal." "Emma, I mean it. This isn't— we barely know each other. You don't owe me anything." She was surprised by how steady her voice sounded, how practiced she'd become at protecting herself. "Go be the person your company needs. It's fine." "It's not fine." His voice was raw now. "Nothing about this is fine. I'm calling you at 3 in the morning because I can't stop thinking about how you looked in the snow, and I'm sitting in a conference room making decisions worth millions of dollars, and all I can think about is that I'm going to lose you before I even really had you." "Then what do you want from me?" The question came out sharper than intended, edged with 3 years of accumulated hurt. "You want me to say it's okay that you're choosing work? That I'll just wait around until you have time for me?" "I already did that dance, Alexander. I already spent 2 years being understanding while someone else's priorities came first." "No. God, no. I want—" He exhaled slowly. "I want you to tell me I'm being an idiot. That the deal isn't more important than this. That I should walk out of this building right now and show up at your door and prove that I meant what I said about being worth changing for." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes. "But you won't, will you?" The pause that followed was answer enough. I have 400 employees depending on this merger, he said finally. Hospitals in Montana and Wyoming and rural Texas that won't get the technology they need if we don't close this deal. Patients who... His voice broke. How do I choose between that and you? How is that even a choice? And there it was. The impossible equation. The moral weight that made this different from her ex's simple cowardice. This wasn't about family approval or social suitability. This was about genuine responsibility, real consequences, people's lives hanging in the balance. You can't, Emma said, and something in her chest was cracking open, that careful wall crumbling. You can't choose between them, and I wouldn't want you to be the kind of person who could. So what does that mean? Emma looked around her dark studio, at the half-finished painting of her grandmother's apartment still on the easel, at the life she'd built that was safe and small and entirely her own. It means I don't know. It means this is terrifying and complicated and nothing like what I thought I wanted. But she could hear the hope in his voice, desperate and young. But maybe that's okay. Maybe things that matter are supposed to be terrifying. She pulled the quilt tighter. Go back to your meeting, Alexander. Save your deal. Save those hospitals. And when you're done, when you can actually be present, call me. Not at 3 a.m. because you're panicking. Call me when you're ready to figure out what being both people looks like. And you'll answer? Emma thought about the snow, about his hand almost touching hers across the table, about the way he'd looked at her painting like it contained answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. Yeah, she said quietly. I'll answer. Emma, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but don't, she interrupted. Don't make promises you might not keep. Just finish what you started. Then we'll see. She ended the call before he could respond, before she could hear whatever declaration or apology was forming on his lips. Her phone screen glowed in the darkness, 2:53 a.m., and Emma sat in the quiet of her studio, listening to the city sounds filtering through her window, wondering if she'd just made the bravest or stupidest decision of her life. Outside, it had started snowing again, covering Brooklyn in fresh white silence. And Emma, for the first time in 3 years, let herself hope that maybe, possibly, this time would be different. Even if she was terrified, it wouldn't be. Emma didn't hear from Alexander for 4 days. She told herself she wasn't counting, but she was. 4 days of checking her phone compulsively, of painting with half her attention elsewhere, of Katie texting increasingly concerned messages that Emma ignored. She finished the painting of her grandmother's apartment on Thursday evening, and for the first time in 15 years of trying, she got it right. The exact quality of light, the specific warmth of memory, the moment right before loss. She sat on her studio floor staring at it, tears streaming down her face, unsure if she was crying about her grandmother or her father, or Alexander, or just the terrifying possibility that maybe she was finally ready to stop hiding in the past. The knock on her door came at 7:32 p.m. Emma opened it to find Alexander standing in the hallway, and he looked devastated. Not tired from work, devastated. Soul-deep exhausted, like he'd been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally set it down. "Hi," he said. "Hi." She didn't move from the doorway, didn't make it easy for him. "We closed the deal, this morning. It took 4 days of negotiations and compromise and giving up more than I wanted to, but we got it done. The hospitals will get their technology." He smiled, but it was fragile. "I should feel victorious. I feel empty." Emma crossed her arms, protecting herself. "Why are you here, Alexander?" "Because I spent 4 days in conference rooms making impossible decisions, and every single one of them felt meaningless because I kept thinking about what you said. About being both people. About being present." He took a breath. "And I realized I've never actually tried. I've been using work as an excuse to not show up for anything real, because work is safe. Work has clear metrics. You close the deal or you don't. You succeed or you fail. But this, he gestured between them. This doesn't have metrics. This requires showing up even when I don't know if I'm enough. Alexander. I'm not done. His voice was rough. I need to say this. The night you told me to finish what I started, I almost walked out of that meeting. I almost chose you. And then I realized that would just be another version of running away, choosing one thing over another instead of figuring out how to hold both. He stepped closer. So I stayed. I finished the deal, and then I went home, and I sat in my workshop, and I built something. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box, maybe 6 inches square, the wood honey-colored and smooth. He held it out to her. Emma took it carefully, feeling the weight of it, the careful craftsmanship. The lid slid open to reveal an interior lined with deep blue velvet, and inside was a small brass compass, old and beautiful. It was my father's, Alexander said quietly. The only thing I kept when he died. He carried it everywhere, even though it didn't work. The needle just spins without settling. He used to say it was perfect that way, that being lost was just another word for having options. His voice cracked. I want you to have it. I can't. This is too much. Emma, please. Let me finish. He moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion in his face, the vulnerability. I've been lost since my father died. Maybe before that. I built a company and a reputation and a life that looks successful, but I've been spinning without settling, just like that needle. And then I met you, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I could find north again. Emma felt tears burning. You can't put that on me. I can't be your compass. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking... He stopped, and when he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. I'm asking if you'll let me try to be present, to be honest, to show up even when I'm terrified I'll fail. I'm asking for a chance to prove that I can be both the person who builds companies and the person who builds furniture and the person who shows up for you when it matters. You don't even know me, Emma said, but her resistance was crumbling. I know you paint light like it's holy. I know you wear your grandmother's cardigan because it still smells like her. I know you're brave enough to show up disheveled to fancy restaurants and honest enough to tell me when I'm being an idiot. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her face. I know that 4 days without hearing your voice felt like punishment. And I know that's not rational or reasonable or based on enough time together. But it's true anyway. Emma looked down at the compass in her hands, at the spinning needle that never settled, and she thought about her grandmother, about her father, about 3 years of keeping herself safe by keeping herself small. I'm terrified, she whispered. Good, Alexander said, echoing his words from the snow. That means it matters. She looked up at him then, at this man who had somehow become important in the space of 1 evening and 4 days of absence, and she made a choice. Not a safe choice. Not a reasonable choice. But hers. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, you can try. We can try. She stepped back, opening the door wider. But I need you to see something first. She led him into her studio, to the painting of her grandmother's apartment that was still drying on the easel. Alexander stood in front of it for a long moment, not speaking, and Emma watched his face transform as he took it in. The light through the window, the specific quality of memory, the moment before loss became real. Emma, he breathed. It's finished. For the first time, it's actually finished. She stood beside him, looking at her own work. I painted it while you were gone, and I realized something. I've been painting this memory for 15 years, trying to capture the moment before loss. But what I was really painting was the moment I stopped trusting that anything could last. The moment I decided safety was better than risk. She turned to face him. But you can't paint light without shadow. You can't capture beauty without acknowledging that it's temporary. That's what makes it matter. Alexander's hand found hers, and this time she didn't pull away. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of painting the past. I'm saying I want to risk the present. She squeezed his fingers. I'm saying, okay, let's try to be both people, the ones who are terrified and the ones who are brave enough anyway. He pulled her close then, and Emma let herself be held, let herself feel the solid reality of him, cedar and exhaustion and hope. Outside her window, Brooklyn hummed with evening life, and somewhere in the distance, Christmas lights were flickering on, making the darkness beautiful. Thank you, Alexander whispered into her hair. Emma closed her eyes, holding the compass in one hand and holding him with the other, and let herself believe that maybe, possibly, some things were worth the risk of breaking for. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear, the kind of sharp winter day that made Manhattan look like it had been drawn with clean lines and brilliant light. Emma stood in Alexander's penthouse workshop, watching him sand the rocking chair he'd made for his sister, and tried not to think about how natural this felt, being here, in his space, as if she belonged. They'd spent the past 2 weeks learning each other in careful increments. Morning coffee at her studio before he went to work. Late dinners where he'd show up still wearing his suit, but with sawdust somehow in his hair. Quiet evenings where she'd paint while he sketched furniture designs, both of them existing in comfortable parallel creation. But today was different. Today, his entire family was coming for Christmas Eve dinner, and Emma was about to meet the people whose approval had always mattered more than anything else in Alexander's carefully constructed world. You're nervous, he said without looking up from his sanding. I'm not nervous. Your left foot has been tapping for 10 minutes. You only do that when you're anxious. He set down the sandpaper and turned to face her, his expression gentle. They're going to love you. You don't know that. I know my sister has already looked up your work online and wants to commission a painting. I know my mother has been asking about you every day since I mentioned you. And I know... He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. I know that even if they didn't love you, which is impossible, it wouldn't change anything. Not anymore. Emma wanted to believe him, but she'd heard similar promises before, had watched them dissolve under the pressure of family expectations and social reality. Alexander, I'm an artist who lives in a 400-square-foot studio in Brooklyn. Your penthouse is bigger than my entire building. Your watch costs more than I made last year. How is your family not going to see me as what? Someone real? Someone who makes me happy? His voice was firm now, certain. Emma, look at me. She did, meeting his gray eyes that had become so familiar, so necessary. My ex-fiancé came from the right family, went to the right schools, knew how to navigate every social situation perfectly, and I was miserable. I was performing a version of success that had nothing to do with who I actually was. He cupped her face gently. You show up disheveled and honest, and you make me want to be honest too. That's not something my family will judge. That's something they've been waiting for. The doorbell rang before Emma could respond, and her stomach dropped. Alexander squeezed her hand once, then led her toward the living room where floor-to-ceiling windows framed a postcard view of Central Park covered in snow. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 30s, heavily pregnant, with Alexander's same gray eyes and a smile that transformed her entire face. You must be Emma, she said, pulling Emma into an immediate hug that smelled like cinnamon and something floral. I'm Sarah, and this, she gestured to her enormous belly. is the baby who's been demanding I eat pickles and ice cream at 3 a.m. for 6 months. Behind her, an older woman entered with the kind of elegant presence that made Emma instinctively stand straighter. Alexander's mother had silver hair cut in a sharp bob and wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe. But her smile was warm as she took Emma's hands. "So you're the artist who's made my son remember how to smile," she said. "I've been wanting to meet you." The evening unfolded with a surprising ease that Emma hadn't expected. Sarah was funny and self-deprecating, making jokes about her pregnancy cravings and asking Emma detailed questions about her painting process with genuine interest. Alexander's mother, Margaret, had run an art gallery in Boston for 30 years before retiring, and she and Emma fell into an easy discussion about contemporary painters and the economics of the art world. But it was during dinner, as they sat around Alexander's handmade dining table, eating the meal his mother had insisted on preparing, that the real moment came. "Alexander tells us you lost your father's gallery," Margaret said gently, and the table went quiet. "I'm so sorry. I knew your father, actually, Samuel Chen. We crossed paths at several auctions over the years. He had an extraordinary eye." Emma felt her throat tighten. "You knew him?" "I did, and I know what happened in 2019 wasn't his fault. The market shifted, collectors panicked, and good people lost everything." Margaret's voice was kind but direct. "Your father was one of the honest ones, Emma. That's rare in our world. He died thinking he'd failed," Emma said quietly. "That's what I can't—" She stopped, surprised by how much emotion was suddenly pressing against her chest. Alexander's hand found hers under the table, steady and certain. "He didn't fail," Margaret said firmly. "He raised a daughter who makes art that matters, who shows up authentic in a world that rewards performance. That's not failure. That's legacy." Emma felt tears burning and tried to blink them away, but Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her other hand. "It's okay to cry on Christmas Eve," she said softly. "I've been crying at insurance commercials for 3 months. Emotions are allowed." The kindness of it broke something open in Emma's chest, and she found herself crying properly now. Not delicate tears, but the messy, honest kind. Alexander pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder while his family gave them space, and Margaret quietly cleared plates. "I'm sorry," Emma managed after a moment. I'm ruining Christmas Eve." "You're not ruining anything," Alexander said into her hair. "You're being real. That's all anyone here wants." Later, after dinner, Sarah pulled Alexander aside while Emma helped Margaret with dishes. Through the doorway, Emma could hear their conversation. "She's perfect for you," Sarah said. "You know that, right?" "I know." Alexander's voice was soft. "I'm terrified I'll mess it up." "You won't. Not if you keep showing up like this. Not if you keep being the person who calls me at midnight to ask if the rocking chair is good enough." Sarah's voice turned teasing. "Though I still can't believe you didn't tell me about her until 2 weeks ago. You, who tells me everything. I was afraid if I said it out loud it wouldn't be real. That I'd wake up and she'd be gone and I'd realize I'd imagined the whole thing." "Alex." Sarah's voice softened. "She's not going anywhere. Look at how she's laughing with Mom. Look at how she fits here, with us, like she's always been part of this." Emma glanced over at Alexander then, and their eyes met across the room. He smiled, that real smile that made everything else fade away, and mouthed, "Okay?" She nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. Something like peace, something like belonging. As midnight approached, they moved to the workshop where the rocking chair sat finished and gleaming. Sarah cried when she saw it, hormones and gratitude mixing into something beautiful. Alexander's mother examined Emma's painting photos on her phone with the careful attention of a professional, asking questions about technique and vision. And Emma, Standing in this workshop surrounded by handmade furniture and Christmas lights, and people who had welcomed her without hesitation, realized that she'd been wrong about what love looked like. It wasn't about fitting into someone else's life. It wasn't about being suitable or polished or enough. It was about finding people who saw you disheveled and honest and said, "Yes, exactly like that. Stay." Spring came to New York the way it always did, tentatively at first, a few brave crocuses pushing through the last of the snow in Central Park, then suddenly, explosively, the entire city bursting into green and gold and impossible hope. Emma stood in her new studio space in Chelsea, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows that Alexander had insisted were non-negotiable when they'd gone studio hunting together. It was 3 times the size of her Brooklyn apartment, with exposed brick walls and enough room for both her painting and his woodworking bench that now occupied the corner by the eastern windows. The painting on her easel was different from anything she'd done before. Not a memory this time, but a moment. Alexander's hands shaping wood, the particular quality of afternoon light in his workshop, sawdust suspended in air like tiny stars. She'd titled it Present Tense, and it was the first piece in her new series about finding home in unexpected places. Her phone buzzed. "Katie, gallery opening tonight. Are you nervous?" Stupid question. Of course you're nervous, but you're going to be amazing. See you at 7. The opening. Emma had almost forgotten in the peaceful rhythm of the morning. Tonight, her first solo show in 3 years, at Margaret's Gallery in Soho. 23 paintings, all completed in the 4 months since Christmas Eve, all exploring the space between memory and presence, loss and hope, safety and risk. The door opened, and Alexander walked in carrying 2 coffees and a bag from her favorite bakery. He'd taken the morning off, actually blocked it in his calendar, delegated his meetings, done all the things he'd sworn he didn't know how to do. "How's the painting?" he asked, setting down the coffee and wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Finished, I think. Or as finished as it's going to be." She leaned back into him, feeling the solid reality of his presence. "I'm terrified." "Good," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. That means it matters. They'd turned it into their private joke, their reminder that fear and importance occupied the same space. She turned in his arms to face him, taking in the details she'd memorized over 4 months. The scar above his eyebrow, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the calluses on his hands that now came from building furniture for their shared space. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for all of it. You don't have to thank me for being present. That's not a favor. That's just..." He paused, searching for words. "That's what love looks like. Showing up. Building something together. Making room. Love." He'd said it so casually, as if it was simply a fact rather than a declaration. They hadn't used that word yet, had been dancing around it carefully. Both of them still learning to trust that this was real, that it would last. "Say that again," Emma whispered. Alexander's expression shifted, understanding settling into his gray eyes. "I love you," he said, clear and certain. "I love how you show up authentic even when it's terrifying. I love that you make me want to be both people, the CEO and the woodworker, the successful one and the honest one. I love..." His voice caught. "I love that you taught me I don't have to choose, that I can hold both." Emma felt tears spilling over, but they were the good kind, the kind that came from something breaking open rather than breaking apart. "I love you too," she said. "Even though you're impossible and you work too much and you still can't remember to text me when you're going to be late." He laughed, pulling her closer. "I'm working on it. I know you are. That's why I love you." They stood there in the sunlight, in their shared space, and Emma thought about that first night, showing up disheveled to Lumiere, expecting nothing, finding everything, She thought about her grandmother's apartment, her father's gallery, all the losses that had shaped her into someone who knew how to protect herself, but had forgotten how to be open. "I need to tell you something," Alexander said after a moment. "About tonight." Emma's stomach tightened with old familiar fear. "What?" "I invited someone. To the opening." He pulled back slightly to look at her face. "Sarah had her baby 2 weeks ago. A girl, Elena. And she's been asking to meet you properly, not just at the hospital when everyone was exhausted. So I told her about the opening, and she wants to come. With Elena. And the rocking chair somehow. Which seems logistically impossible, but Sarah insists." Relief flooded through Emma, followed by something warmer. "You want your niece at my gallery opening? I want everyone who matters to be there. My family, your friends, Katie, who orchestrated this entire thing by being relentlessly pushy." He smiled. "I want to stand in that gallery and watch people see your work and understand what I understood the first time Katie showed me your painting. That you make beauty out of memory. That you make truth visible." Emma kissed him then, there in the morning light of their shared studio, and it tasted like coffee and possibility, and the particular sweetness of choosing to be brave. The gallery opening that evening was everything Emma had dreamed of, and nothing she'd expected. The space was packed. Margaret had invited collectors, critics, artists, people who mattered in the art world that had once been Emma's inheritance. But standing in the center of it all, watching strangers stop in front of her paintings with tears in their eyes, Emma realized the validation she'd been seeking wasn't about proving her father hadn't failed or showing her ex he'd made a mistake. It was about this: making something true and sharing it with people who understood that truth was more valuable than perfection. Alexander stood beside her, his hand warm in hers, and when people asked about the painting titled "Present Tense," he smiled and said, "That's my hands. Emma sees things I don't see in myself. She makes the ordinary holy." Sarah arrived with baby Elena sleeping in a carrier, and Katie cried when she saw the painting Emma had made for her. A thank you for being relentlessly pushy, for seeing what Emma couldn't see, for setting up a blind date that had changed everything. Late in the evening, after most of the crowd had dispersed, and the gallery was quiet except for the soft classical music Margaret had chosen, Emma found herself standing in front of the painting of her grandmother's apartment. The first one she'd finished. The one that had taken 15 years and one terrifying night to complete. Margaret appeared beside her. "This one isn't for sale," she noted, checking her catalog. "No," Emma agreed. "That one stays with me." "Good." Margaret studied the painting with her professional eye. "It's the heart of the collection. Everything else radiates from this moment, this understanding that we paint not to preserve the past, but to make peace with how it shaped us." "My father would have loved this," Emma said quietly. "All of it, seeing his daughter in a real gallery again. He would have been impossibly proud." Margaret turned to face her. "But Emma, you know this isn't about him anymore, don't you? This is yours. Your vision, your courage, your truth. You didn't do this to redeem his memory. You did this because you're an artist, and artists make things, even when it's terrifying." Emma nodded, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. Alexander found her there, wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "Ready to go home?" Home. Their shared studio in Chelsea with the morning light and the woodworking bench, and the life they were building together, one honest moment at a time. "Yes," Emma said, and meant it completely. They walked out into the spring evening, and the city stretched before them like a canvas, full of possibility, full of risk, full of the particular beauty that came from choosing to be present. Snow had covered these same streets 4 months ago, transforming everything into temporary magic. But this warmth, this growth, this carefully tended becoming. This was permanent. Or as permanent as anything could be when you loved someone enough to keep showing up, keep being honest, keep building something together even when you didn't have all the answers. Alexander squeezed her hand as they walked, and Emma thought about the compass he'd given her, still on her bedside table, the needle spinning endlessly without settling. She'd asked him once if it bothered him that it didn't work properly. "It works perfectly," he'd said. "It reminds me that being lost isn't the opposite of being found. Sometimes it's just the first step toward discovering where you actually want to go." Emma looked up at the man beside her, this impossible, beautiful person who'd fallen for her when she was disheveled and honest and exactly herself, and felt gratitude so profound it was almost physical. "I love you," she said, because it was true and because she could. "I love you too," Alexander replied, and the words were easy now, natural, as inevitable as spring following winter. Above them, the stars were just beginning to appear in the New York sky, and somewhere in the city, other people were having other beginnings, other moments of choosing bravery over safety. But this moment, this particular spring evening with paint still under her fingernails and his hand warm in hers and their shared future unfolding like a story neither of them could have written alone, this moment was theirs. Perfect and imperfect and entirely, impossibly real. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.